The suitcase hit the wet ground before Lena Ben could turn around. Behind her, the iron gate of the only home she had ever known clicked shut. She stood in the rain and listened to 15 years of her life lock itself away on the other side. That was how a family threw away the child they chose. Not a child born by accident. Not a child left on a doorstep by strangers who had no choice. A child they picked, signed papers for, brought home on a Tuesday afternoon with balloons tied to the front gate and a cake on the kitchen table. They had called her daughter for 15 years, right up until the word stopped being convenient. Before this story goes any further, if you are watching this and you have not subscribed to this channel yet, this is your sign to do it right now. Hit that subscribe button and turn on your notifications. Stories like this one drop every week and you do not want to miss them. Now let us get back to Lena. The storm had been building since afternoon. By nightfall it split open like something that had been holding its breath too long. Rain came down in heavy sheets across the wealthy district of Gangnam, washing the streets clean of everything except the girl standing outside the iron gates of the Sung family mansion. Lena stood with the suitcase at her feet, one hand pressed flat against the gate as if she still believed it would open again. She was 22 years old. Her wool coat was already soaked through, and the cold had moved past her skin into something deeper. The rain pressed her locks against her face and neck. The security light above the gate buzzed and flickered like it could not decide whether to stay on. Behind those bars was the only home she had known since she was 7 years old. The shouting had started 3 hours earlier. She had come downstairs for dinner and found the entire family seated and waiting. Not to eat, to confront. Chairman Sung sat at the head of the table with a folder open in front of him. His wife sat beside him, not looking at Lena. Their biological son, Hyun, leaned back in his chair with his arms folded and something close to satisfaction sitting on his face like it belonged there. "Sit down," Chairman Sung said. Lena sat. 40 million won, he said. Missing from the household account over the past 8 months. Small transfers. Irregular amounts. Very careful. He slid a printed document across the table toward her. "The account the transfers went to is opened with a copy of your ID." Lena looked at the document. Then she looked up. "I did not do this." "Your ID," he repeated. "Someone used my ID. I did not open that account. I have never seen that account number in my life." Madam Sung finally looked at her. The expression on her face was not anger. It was something much colder, the look of a woman who had already made her decision and was only waiting for the conversation to finish so she could act on it. "We gave you everything," she said quietly. "Education, a home, a name. I know what you gave me," Lena said, "and I have never taken anything that was not mine. I am telling you the truth. The bank records can be fabricated. Someone set me up." She turned her eyes to Hyun. He did not flinch. He looked back at her with calm, empty eyes, and something cold and certain settled in her stomach. "Hyun." She said his name carefully. "Did you do this?" The silence that followed was enormous. Chairman Sung rose from his chair. "You are accusing my son. I am asking a question. You are accusing my son in my house, after stealing from this family." "I did not steal anything." Her voice broke on the last word. Not from weakness. From the particular pain of being disbelieved by the people who were supposed to know her better than anyone. 15 years. She had lived in this house for 15 years, and they were looking at her like she was a stranger who had wandered in off the street and helped herself. Madam Sung rose from her chair. "Pack your things." "Ama. Do not call me that." The words came out flat and final with no room on either side. "Pack your things and leave this house tonight. We will not involve the police as long as you go quietly. Consider that our generosity." Lena packed in 20 minutes. Not because she was fast, but because she had never fully unpacked in the way people unpack when they believe they are truly home. She moved through the bedroom that had been hers for 15 years and understood, with awful clarity, that it had always been a guest room with her name written on the door. She wheeled her suitcase to the front door. The housekeeper who had raised her alongside the family watched from the hallway and said nothing. Lena did not blame her. She was an employee. There was nothing she could do, and they both knew it. The gate opened long enough for Lena to walk through. Then it closed. She stood in the rain and just breathed. The cold worked its way into her bones the way cold does when the body has given up fighting it. She did not cry. The rain was already doing enough. She picked up the handle of her suitcase, turned away from the gate, and started walking without a direction in mind. The streets in this part of the city were wide and very quiet at night. Expensive buildings lined both sides of the road. Every house locked. Every light behind glass. Nobody outside. Nobody who would have stopped if they had been. By the time she reached the end of the road, her fingers had gone stiff and the suitcase will kept catching on the wet ground. She stopped under a small overhang outside a shuttered flower shop, pressed her back against the wall and tried to think. Where could she go? Who she could call? Her university friends had scattered after graduation, back to their own cities and families. Her closest friend Dana had moved to Busan 6 months ago. The distance was impossible tonight. Her phone battery sat at 11%. She had 30,000 won in her wallet. Her monthly allowance from the Sung family lived in a bank account she no longer trusted would be accessible by morning. She pressed her palms together and tried to warm them with her own breath. A pair of headlights appeared at the far end of the road. Slow and deliberate. A black vehicle, not one of the small sedans most people drove in this neighborhood, but something larger and heavier, the kind of car that belonged to someone who had no reason to rush. It moved through the rain without urgency. Lena watched it approach without much thought. Cars passed. That was a thing cars did. But this one slowed when it reached her. Then it stopped. The window came down. The man behind the wheel was a driver. The person she needed to look at was in the back, seated in the dark interior, watching her with the stillness of someone working through a decision. "Get in," the driver said through the window. Lena stepped back. "No, thank you. It is not a request from me," the driver said, with the measured tone of someone delivering information rather than making conversation. "My employer is asking." "I do not know your employer." A pause. Then a voice came from the back of the car. Low and even, not raised, not hurried. "You are standing in the rain." "I am aware," Lena said. "You have been standing there for some time." She said nothing to that. "Where are you going?" he asked. She had no answer. The back door opened from the inside. The man stepped out. He was tall in the way he carried himself, like every inch of it was intentional. Dark coat, unbuttoned. He was younger than she had expected. Sharp features, direct eyes that held no aggression in them, only attention. He did not move toward her. He stood on his side of the open door and looked at her with the quiet certainty of someone who had already decided how this was going to go. "You are going to get sick standing here," he said. "That is my problem." "Yes," he agreed. "And you are still standing in the rain." There was something in the way he said it. Not unkind. Not warm exactly. But nothing like the cold indifference she had spent the last 3 hours drowning in. She stared at him. He waited. Neither of them moved. Then the cold made the decision for her. Her knees gave way first, not a dramatic fall but a slow slide, the way a person goes down when the body has simply run out of argument. She caught herself against the wall, but her fingers would not hold and she was going down regardless. He crossed the distance before she reached the ground. His arm came around her and he took her weight without comment or fuss. He said something short to his driver in Korean. Then he was guiding her toward the car, her suitcase already being lifted into the trunk by someone she had not noticed standing nearby. She did not have the strength to argue. The car was warm. The seat was deep and soft. The driver pulled away from the curb and the flower shop, and the rain-soaked street fell away behind the window. Lena sat in the back of a car belonging to a man she did not know, too exhausted and too cold to feel afraid yet. The man settled into the seat beside her. Not close. He left space between them and said nothing. After a long moment she turned to look at him. Who are you? He considered the question. June. That is not an answer. It is my name, he said. Which is more than you have given me. She looked at him for another moment. Then she turned back to the window and watched the rain travel across the glass. And whatever she had meant to say next dissolved into the exhaustion that was pulling her under. She was asleep before they left the block. She woke to warmth and stillness. The ceiling above her was high and pale with clean molding along the edges. She spent several seconds staring at it before she remembered where she was, or rather before she accepted that she did not know where she was. She sat up slowly. She was on a wide cream sofa. Someone had removed her wet coat and replaced it with a thick blanket. Her shoes were set neatly beside the sofa. Her suitcase rested against the wall, untouched. The room was large. Heavy furniture, clean lines, bookshelves that had actually been read. A window looked out over a garden still being worked over by the last of the rain. A lamp burned in the corner. Everything else was still. A woman appeared in the doorway. Middle-aged, uniformed, with the unhurried authority of someone who had been managing difficult households for a long time. You are awake, she said in careful English. Good. I am Mrs. Maria. I manage this household. She set a tray on the table beside the sofa. Hot tea, soup, a folded towel. The master said you are to be given a room and anything you need. The master, Lena repeated. Mr. June. Lena looked around the room again. The house had a particular weight to it, the kind that came from many people moving with discipline and purpose. She had noticed two men at the entrance when she half woke during the drive up. Not servants. Something else entirely. What kind of house is this? She asked. Mrs. Maria looked at her with an expression that was polite and entirely uninformative. A safe one, she said. Drink your soup before it cools. Lena drank the soup. She was given a room on the second floor. Larger than her bedroom at the Sung mansion, with a private bathroom and a wardrobe stocked with women's clothing in roughly her size. She did not ask how that had happened. She was learning quickly that this house moved on a logic she had not yet mapped. She slept for 12 hours. When she came downstairs the next morning, the house was alive with quiet purpose. Men moved through the lower corridors in pairs, speaking low. They looked at her without expression and stepped out of her way. She followed the smell of coffee to a large kitchen where Mrs. Maria was directing two staff members with the efficiency of someone who did not repeat herself. Sit, Mrs. Maria told her, and pointed at a stool by the island. Lena sat. She was given coffee, fruit and rice, and she ate without being asked to. She was hungry in the deep hollow way that came from not eating properly for too long. Where is June? She asked. Working, Mrs. Maria said. It is 8 in the morning. He works at 8 in the morning, Mrs. Maria said without irony. Lena turned the coffee cup in her hands. I want to thank him and ask him what happens now. Whether I can stay until I figure something out. He knows, Mrs. Maria said. He knows what? That you want to thank him. That you need time. She wiped the counter with the efficiency of a woman who had seen far more complicated situations than this and handled all of them. He said you may stay as long as necessary. He did not attach conditions. Lena stared at her. He is not a complicated man, Mrs. Maria said, in a tone that suggested she knew this was not entirely true. Finish your breakfast. Lena saw June for the first time in daylight that afternoon. She had been sitting in the garden, wrapped in a coat from the wardrobe, watching the last of the rain move through the hedges, when footsteps on the stone path made her look up. He was in a dark suit, no tie, with the look of a man who had come from several consecutive meetings and was somewhere between the last one and the next. He stopped when he saw her, and there was a moment where she thought he might turn back, not out of coldness but out of the careful restraint of someone who was precise about his own presence. He did not turn back. He walked to the garden bench a few feet away and sat down. Neither of them spoke. "You slept," he said finally. Not a question. "For most of the day, yes." She looked at him. "Thank you. For last night. I want you to know I am not someone who makes a habit of collapsing in the street." Something shifted at the corner of his mouth. Not quite a smile, but the suggestion of one. "I did not assume you were." "I am also not someone who accepts help easily," she said. "Or at all usually." "I noticed." "I still got in the car." "You did," he said. "When your legs stopped giving you a choice." She looked away. In the garden a single bird worked its way along the top of the hedge, completely unbothered. Lena watched it for a moment. "What do you want from me?" she asked. "In exchange for this?" She felt him look at her. "Nothing," he said. "That is not how things work." "It is how I choose for things to work," he said simply. "You were in the rain. Now you are not. That was the full extent of my thinking last night." She turned to look at him directly. He held her gaze with no performance in it. She had met many powerful men through the Sung family. Men who used their money like a language, who made every act of generosity into a debt. June did not feel like those men. He felt like something else, something she did not yet have the right word for. "Stay," he said, rising. "Until you are ready to leave. You will not be bothered here." He walked back toward the house. She watched him go. And for the first time since the gate had closed behind her, she exhaled. 3 days passed. Lena moved through the house carefully, the way a person moves through a space they are not sure belongs to them. She kept to her room, the kitchen, and the garden. She was building a real plan. She had contacted Dana in Busan and explained only that she had left the Sung house. Dana had asked nothing and said to call when she was ready. The bank account access was gone as expected. She had 30,000 won and a degree in international business and a mind that had been solving difficult equations since she was 7 years old. On the 4th day she came downstairs and found a young man sitting in the main corridor. A cloth pressed to his forearm with blood showing through the fabric. His expression the blank focus of someone trying not to react to pain. Lena stopped. He looked up at her. Mid-20s, not much older than her. With the watchful composure she had come to recognize in most of the men in this house. "Is there a first aid kit?" she asked. "I am fine." "You are bleeding through a cloth." "I said I am fine." "I heard you." She walked to the kitchen, found the first aid kit in the second cabinet she checked, brought it back and sat across from him. She opened the kit and laid out what she needed. "Let me see." He looked at the kit, then at her, then slowly moved the cloth away. It was a deep cut, not dangerous but badly cleaned. She worked in silence, disinfecting and closing the wound with the steady focus of someone who had patched injuries before and had no interest in making a production of it. She bandaged the arm and sat back. He looked at it for a moment. "You did not have to do that." "I know," she said, packing up the kit. "What is your name?" A pause. "Min." "Min." She nodded once. "Try not to bleed on the furniture." He almost smiled. She was carrying the kit back to the kitchen when she turned and found June standing in the doorway. She had not heard him approach. She was starting to think that was deliberate. "Min is one of my men," he said. "He was injured." "He has people for that." "He was sitting alone in the corridor," she said. "And I had 2 hands and a first aid kit." June looked at the kit in her hands, then at her face. A beat passed. "Breakfast is ready," he said. It was the first morning they sat at the same table. He ate with the focused efficiency of a man who viewed meals as a requirement rather than an experience. He read while he ate, actual paper, documents stacked beside his coffee. He refilled his own cup rather than calling for anyone. He asked, without looking up, whether she had slept well. She told him she had. He nodded. They ate in a silence that had stopped being uncomfortable somewhere between the coffee and the fruit, the way silence sometimes settles when two people have quietly agreed not to perform ease for each other. On the sixth day, the silence broke in a direction she had not expected. She had come in from the garden after lunch and heard raised voices from the kitchen. Not the low controlled murmurs she had grown used to, but sharp aggressive Korean that stopped the moment she stepped through the back door. A man she had not seen before stood near the counter. Older, broad through the shoulders, with the particular confidence of someone accustomed to saying exactly what he thought without consequence. He looked at Lena. Then he said something in Korean and laughed. She did not understand every word. She understood enough. Eugene, the young staff member who had been quietly kind to Lena from her first morning, turned her face toward the window. Lena set her garden gloves on the counter and said nothing. The man said something else. Still directed at her. Still performing for the room. The door from the corridor opened. June walked in. The laughter stopped. Every person in the kitchen shifted without meaning to, the way a room rearranges itself when the person who matters most inside it arrives. June looked at the older man and said nothing for a moment. "What did you say?" he asked. The man straightened and offered a casual explanation. His voice was slower now, more careful with its weight. June let him finish. "Say it again," he said quietly. The man did not say it again. "Apologize to her." The room held completely still. The older man looked at Lena. Something moved behind his eyes, the quick arithmetic of a man calculating how much pride was worth against how much consequence. He arrived at a number. He apologized. Not warmly. Not with any real feeling. But the words came out and landed, and June accepted them with the stillness of someone who had made his point and had no interest in extending the moment further. He glanced at Lena once, brief and even, then left the kitchen. Eugene appeared at Lena's elbow with a cup of tea, said nothing, and returned to her work. That evening Lena went looking for June. She found him in his study, standing at the window that overlooked the front drive, one hand in his pocket, the other holding a glass he was not drinking from. She knocked on the open door. He turned. "What that man said today," she started. "I want you to know I would have handled it." "I know," he said. "Then why?" "Because he said it in my house," June said. "And I decide what is tolerated in my house." He set the glass down on the windowsill. It was not about charity. It was about standard. She looked at him for a long time. The lamp behind the desk cast the room in low amber. Outside, the evening had gone completely dark and quiet. "That is the first time in a long time," she said, "that someone said that to me." "Said what?" She took a slow breath. "That the standard applies to me too." He did not rush to fill the space with reassurance. He did not reach for sentiment. He simply looked at her with the same directness she was slowly learning to trust, and nodded once. If this story has you hooked right now, make sure you are subscribed so you do not lose it before the ending. Like the video and drop a comment below telling us what you think of June so far. Let us get back to the story. The next morning came in quietly, pale light pushing through the curtains of Lena's room before she was fully awake. She lay still for a moment, listening to the house. Footsteps in the corridor below. The low sound of voices. The smell of coffee rising from the kitchen. She had been here 9 days, and already the sounds of this place had become familiar in a way that unsettled her slightly, the way comfort always unsettled her when it arrived without warning. She got up, dressed, and went downstairs. Mrs. Maria was alone in the kitchen, seated at the small staff table near the window with a cup of tea and a ledger open in front of her. She looked up when Lena walked in, then back down at her ledger without a word. This, Lena had learned, was Mrs. Maria's version of a greeting. It meant she was welcome. Lena made her own coffee. She sat at the island and pulled out the notebook she had been using to map her next steps. Job prospects. Housing options. The contacts she had from her degree program, 3 years old now but still worth reaching out to. She had been working through the list methodically, the same way she had worked through every difficult problem in her life, one line at a time. "You write in that book every morning," Mrs. Maria said, without looking up. "I am making a plan," Lena said. "You have been making a plan since you arrived. It takes time to make a good one." Mrs. Maria turned a page in her ledger. "He is not going to ask you to leave." Lena looked up. "I know that." "Then the plan can wait one more morning." She closed the ledger and stood. "Come. I need help with the supply inventory. Eugene is unwell today." It was not a question. Lena closed her notebook. She spent the morning moving through the house with Mrs. Maria, counting linens, checking storage rooms, logging supplies in the ledger with the neat handwriting Mrs. Maria approved of after inspecting it once and saying nothing further. It was quiet, methodical work, and Lena found she did not mind it. There was something grounding about tasks with clear beginnings and ends, especially when everything else in her life was still open and uncertain. They were in the large storage room off the east corridor when Mrs. Maria said, without any particular setup, "He found you because he was coming back from a meeting that went badly." Lena paused with a stack of folded towels in her arms. "What?" That night, Mrs. Maria checked a shelf and made a note. "He does not usually come through that district. The regular route was blocked. He was in a difficult mood." She moved to the next shelf. "He saw you and told the driver to stop." Lena set the towels down slowly. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because you are a person who needs to understand the full picture before she trusts anything." Mrs. Maria turned to look at her directly. "He did not stop because it was easy. He stopped because something in him decided to." She turned back to her shelf. "I have worked for him for 11 years. I know the difference." Lena stood very still in the middle of the storage room, the ledger in her hands, trying to decide what to do with that information. She was still thinking about it when she walked into the main corridor and nearly stepped into the middle of an argument. Two men she recognized from around the house were squared off near the foot of the stairs, voices tight and low, the particular tension of people who had been holding a disagreement back for too long. She moved to go around them. One of them, a man named Do-won who she had seen at meals, grabbed the other man's collar. Lena stopped. "Enough." Her voice came out flat and clear. Both men looked at her. She looked back at them without moving. "Whatever this is, it does not need to happen here." Do-won stared at her. There was a beat where it could have gone either way. Then he released the other man's collar, straightened his jacket, and walked away down the corridor. The second man exhaled, looked at Lena with something between surprise and embarrassment, and went the other way. She stood alone in the corridor for a moment. "You did that without raising your voice." She turned. June was at the top of the stairs looking down. She had no idea how long he had been standing there. "Raising my voice would have made it worse," she said. He came down the stairs slowly, watching her. "Most people in this house would have walked past. I am not most people in this house." He stopped at the bottom of the stairs, close enough that she could see the particular quality of attention he was giving her, the focused, assessing look she had come to associate with the moments he was revising his understanding of something. "No," he said. "You are not." He walked past her toward his study. Then without turning around he said, "Lunch is at 1. Mrs. Maria makes too much food for one person." Lena looked at the empty corridor. Then she looked at the closed study door. She was at the table at 1. They ate together more regularly after that. Not every meal, but enough that it became a pattern neither of them addressed directly. He still read documents over breakfast. She still kept her notebook nearby. But the silence between them had changed its texture, grown something in it that was not quite ease and not quite tension but something that lived between the two. He asked her one morning over coffee what her degree was in. International business, she said. He looked at her over the rim of his cup. And what did you plan to do with it? Work in trade consulting. I had an offer from a firm in Seoul after graduation. She turned the coffee cup in her hands. The Sung family did not think it was appropriate for me to work. Chairman Sung said it reflected badly on the family. A daughter who needed a salary. June was quiet for a moment. So you stayed? I stayed. She looked at the table. I told myself it was temporary. That I was waiting for the right time. I was there for 2 years after graduation, waiting for a right time that was never going to come. She picked up her coffee. I see that clearly now. What will you do now? He asked. The offer from the firm is long gone. But I have contacts. I have the degree. I have time to rebuild. She met his eyes. I am not afraid of starting from nothing. I have done it before. He looked at her with that steady attention she was slowly getting used to. You have, he said. It was not a question and it was not flattery. It was simply an acknowledgement, the kind that lands differently because it comes without decoration. She held his gaze for a moment longer than she intended to. Then Min appeared in the kitchen doorway holding a folder, and June turned to take it, and the morning moved forward. That evening the rain came back. Not the violent storm of her first night, but a soft persistent rain, the kind that settled in quietly and made no promises about leaving. Lena was standing in the doorway that opened onto the garden, watching it fall on the hedges, when she heard June's footsteps behind her. He stopped beside her. Not close, but close enough that she was aware of the warmth of him against the cool air coming in from outside. They stood there for a moment both watching the rain. Does it bother you? He asked. The rain. She considered the question honestly. It did. For the first few days after I arrived. Every time it started I would hear the gate. She paused. I do not hear the gate as much now. He said nothing. She was not sure he needed to. Can I ask you something? She said. Yes. Why did you stop that night? The truth. Not the simple version. He was quiet long enough that she thought he might not answer. Then he said, You looked like someone who had already decided there was no point in asking for help. Not someone who was too proud. Someone who had asked before and learned not to. He kept his eyes on the garden. I recognized that. She turned to look at him. He did not turn to meet her gaze, but she could see the line of his jaw, the particular stillness of someone who had just said something true and was giving it room to land. You recognized it, she said carefully. From yourself. A pause. From a long time ago. She turned back to the garden. The rain moved through the hedges in slow soft curtains. Somewhere in the house behind them a door closed and footsteps moved away down a corridor, leaving them alone in the doorway. I am glad you stopped, she said. He did not respond immediately. When he did his voice was quieter than usual. So am I. Neither of them moved for a long time after that. 2 days later the Sung family came. Lena was in the garden with Mrs. Maria when she heard the front gates opening. She looked up. Through the tall hedges that lined the front drive she caught the shape of a large silver car moving up toward the house, and something in her went very still. Mrs. Maria looked at her face and then toward the drive. She set down the clipboard she was holding. Come inside, she said. No. Lena stood up from the garden bench. I want to know what they want. Lena. I am not going to hide in the garden. Mrs. Maria looked at her for a moment, then stepped aside. The front door of the house was open by the time Lena reached it. 2 of June's men stood at the entrance, not speaking, not moving, their stillness the specific kind that was meant to communicate something. Chairman Sung stepped out of the silver car first. then his wife, then Hyun, who looked at the house with the expression of someone calculating its value. Chairman Sung saw Lena in the doorway and stopped. Lena. His voice had shifted into the register he used for delicate negotiations, warm and measured in equal parts. We have been looking for you. We were worried. She looked at him and said nothing. Come home, Madam Sung said. She was dressed carefully, every detail considered, the way she always dressed when she wanted something. This has gone far enough. Whatever misunderstanding occurred. You called it theft, Lena said. 2 weeks ago you stood in your dining room and called it theft and told me to leave quietly. That was not a misunderstanding. We were upset. You were certain. She stepped forward onto the front step. You have been certain about me for 15 years. Every time something went wrong in that house you looked at me first. I just did not want to see it clearly until you made it impossible to look away. Chairman Sung's expression shifted, the warmth dropping away to reveal something harder underneath. You are living in this man's house, he said, his voice lower now. You understand who he is. What this looks like. What does it look like? She asked. It looks like you have made a very dangerous choice in a very emotional moment, he said. And we are offering you a way out of it. You are not offering me anything, she said. You came here because you found out whose house this is, and now you are afraid. That is why you are here. Not for me. The silence on the drive was absolute. Then a door behind her opened. She did not need to turn around to know who it was. She felt it in the way the two men at the entrance straightened almost imperceptibly, and in the way Chairman Sung's eyes moved past her and his expression underwent a rapid, involuntary rearrangement. June stepped up beside her. He did not touch her. He simply stood beside her, his hands in his pockets, and looked at Chairman Sung with the particular quality of attention that was not threatening because it did not need to be. You are on my property, he said. Chairman Sung gathered himself. We are here for our daughter. She is not your daughter, June said. The words were quiet and absolute, the way walls are absolute. You made that decision 2 weeks ago in the rain. I was there. Hyun took a small step forward. You have no right. I have every right, June said without looking at him. This is my house. She is under my roof. And you are going to leave now. Hyun opened his mouth. Now, June said. The word had no volume to it. It did not need any. It arrived with the full weight of everything that June was and everyone who worked for him and every consequence that lived behind his name, and it landed on the drive like a closed door. Chairman Sung looked at Lena one more time. She looked back at him without moving, without softening, without giving him anything he had come looking for. Then he turned, said something quietly to his wife, and walked back to the silver car. Madam Sung held Lena's gaze for a moment longer. There was something in her face that might have been regret, or might have been frustration, or might have been both wearing each other's clothes. Then she turned and followed her husband. Hyun was the last to go. He looked at Lena with those calm empty eyes and she looked back, and she made sure he saw that she was not afraid of him. Not anymore. The silver car turned around and moved back down the drive. Lena exhaled. Behind her, Mrs. Maria reappeared and disappeared again without a word. The two men at the entrance relaxed by degrees. The front drive settled back into the quiet it had been keeping before the car arrived. June was still standing beside her. Thank you, she said. You were handling it, he said. I was. She looked at the empty drive. But it helped. Having you there. He said nothing. But he did not move away either. They stood on the front step together until the sound of the silver car had gone completely, until the only sound left was the wind moving through the hedges at the edge of the property, and the distant soft sound of birds settling for the evening. That night the house was quieter than usual. Lena sat by the window in her room for a long time after dinner, watching the sky. The confrontation had left something behind, Not fear, not grief, but a strange lightness, the feeling of a weight she had been carrying so long she had stopped noticing it finally being set down. The Sung family had always lived in the back of her mind as a possibility she had to account for. A door that might open. A voice that might pull her back to a version of herself she was finished with. Now the door had closed from her side. She went downstairs. The main corridor was dim. Most of the house retired for the night. A single lamp was on in the sitting room. June was there, standing near the window that looked out over the garden, one hand resting on the frame. He turned when he heard her. "You should sleep," he said. "I will," she said. "I wanted to say something first." He waited. "When I was 7 years old and the Sungs brought me home," she said, "I decided that if I was grateful enough and quiet enough and useful enough, I would eventually stop feeling like I was one mistake away from being sent back." She looked at him steadily. "I spent 15 years being careful, and they sent me back anyway." He held her gaze. "I am done being careful in that way," she said. "I am done making myself small so that other people stay comfortable." She paused. "I just wanted you to know that. Because you are the reason I can say it." June was quiet for a long moment. Outside, the garden was still. The night settled completely over the hedges and the stone path and the bench where they had sat that first afternoon. "You knew how to say it before you came here," he said finally. "You just needed somewhere safe enough to hear your own voice." She looked at him. Something in her settled at those words, deep and quiet. The way things settle when they finally find the right place. She was standing near the window, and without ceremony or announcement he crossed the room, lifted the coat from the chair beside him, and placed it over her shoulders. His hands rested there for just a moment. Then he stepped back. "You are safe here," he said quietly. She pulled the coat around her and looked at him. "I was never safe before." He did not say that he was sorry for that, or that it would always be different now, or any of the easy things that would have cost nothing and meant less. He simply looked at her with that directness she had come to trust above almost anything else she had encountered in her 22 years, and she understood that some things did not need to be said to be true. Outside, the city moved on without them. Somewhere across Gangnam, in a house with iron gates and a cake that had long been eaten, a family was having dinner. A gate was locked. A bedroom was empty. And in a house that had felt like danger and turned out to feel like the first solid ground she had ever stood on, Lena Ben was finally completely still. If this story moved something in you, then you are exactly who this channel was made for. Every week we bring you stories about love that finds you when you are not looking for it. About women who are knocked down by the people who are supposed to protect them and who rise anyway. About the kind of strength that does not announce itself but shows up quietly and changes everything. If that is the kind of story that keeps you coming back, then subscribe to this channel right now and turn on your notifications so you never miss a single upload. Like this video because it lets us know you want more. Share it with someone who needs to hear a story like this today. And leave a comment below telling me your favorite moment from this story. We read every single one. Thank you for watching all the way to the end. A new story is coming very soon and I promise you, it is worth the wait.